What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. As you can tell from the title, today's video is my May wrap-up. Very excited for this month's books. It was a good month. I read about as many regular books as I listened to audiobooks. I've kind of been having a mix of them recently, and I don't know, I like that. I find it's honestly probably the best tip that I can give you guys if you're wanting to read a little bit more, is just always be listening to an audiobook at the same time as you're actually reading physical books. So before we even get into the video, you guys make sure to leave me a comment below of your favorite book that you read in May. I'm always open to recommendations, of course. So anything that has summer vibes, maybe takes place in Europe. I kind of want to put some books on my TBR that take place outside of America, maybe like somewhere in the Greek islands or Italy or somewhere like that. So if you guys have any recommendations, leave them down below. Without further ado, let's get into it. So the first book I read in May was Burnt Sugar by Abny Doshi. This follows a mom and her daughter reflecting on their lives together, nearing sort of the end of the mom's life as she struggles with dementia. And so the daughter, who's our main character, Antara, she is kind of grappling with motherhood. She's a new mom, and she's feeling very self-reflective and kind of thinking back to her formative years and the way that she was raised, which was not with very much care. And she's kind of struggling with the idea of, how do I not let history repeat itself? Like, how do I raise my daughter better than I was raised? So the blurb says, this is a love story and a story about betrayal, not between lovers, but between a mother and daughter. In her youth, Tara was wild. She abandoned her arranged marriage to join an ashram, embarked on a stint as a beggar, mostly to spite her affluent parents, and spent years chasing a homeless artist, all with little Antara in tow. But now Tara is forgetting things, and Antara is an adult, an artist and married, and must confront the task of caring for a woman who never cared for her. The main sort of plot is just sort of the tension between the mom and the daughter. It was definitely a slow burn for me. It's not one of those books that was like, you know, it kept me turning pages. It does take place in India, and like I mentioned earlier, I would like to start reading more books set outside of the US. In my notes, I said there were some themes of family trauma, nostalgia, how much memory makes us who we are, and how much of what we were taught by our parents will we inevitably pass on to our children. So very much sort of just kind of a family drama. Some of my favorite quotes, this one in particular, she says, I think about every decision I've made until this point that has brought me here, and I wonder how much is because it was easy. And I think about that all the time. So there were lots of little moments in here where it sort of brings you back to think about your own life, and I love books that sort of make me self-reflective as well. So I think I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5. Next up was my first and only DNF of May. Was not vibing with it, and that was The Every by Dave Eggers. So last month I read The Circle. Well, I DNF'd The Circle. Concept, awesome. And The Every, unfortunately, just felt like a rehash of The Circle. Like, it just the same themes kept popping up. And of course, you get that with, like, if you're gonna read the same author, a lot of times the same themes do come up. I'm gonna talk about that a little bit later with a Kazuo Ishiguro book that I read this month. So that's totally fine. Like, this theme of big tech taking over the world and kind of sucking our souls and taking all of our privacy, and us just sort of the willing consumers not really seeing anything wrong with that. We're just like so blinded by social media and, you know, the new shiny thing. It was literally the same thing. It was like the story was a little bit different, but the characters were still, they kind of felt like cardboard cutouts. I just couldn't really connect with them. You know, I'm a science fiction fan, so it's unfortunate that they didn't really grab me. I mean, they sound right up my street. I thought I was gonna be obsessed with both of them. That's why I gave the second one, the sequel, a chance, even though I DNF'd the first one. But yeah, it didn't get any better with The Every, unfortunately. Next up was People We Meet on Vacation. This one was super cute. It's been all over Pinterest and Bookstagram and Book Talk. It's just one of those sort of classic beach reads. So if you've been living under a rock and you don't know, it's about Poppy and Alex. They are best friends, and they would always take a vacation together every year. I think it's 2 years prior to the start of the novel, something happened. We don't know what, it's not explained in the beginning, but there was sort of a falling out. They haven't really contacted each other. And so Poppy accidentally texts Alex and is like, hey, you know, what's going on or whatever. And so they start talking again and plan a trip. And she, of course, wants it to go perfect because they haven't seen each other in a while. It's going to be awkward anyway. I think she works for a travel magazine, so she gets trips paid for a lot of times. She gets to travel for free. She sort of starts the trip under the guise that, oh, it's all paid for, you know, I just want somebody to come along with me. Well, really, it's not paid for by the travel company. She's just wanting this trip with Alex to try to sort of reconcile their differences. And then, of course, the whole trope of like, will they get together? Well, you know, are they more than friends? Is this trip gonna be the thing that, you know, makes them both realize they're meant for each other? Or is, you know, are they just really friends? Kind of, you know, that whole will they, won't they trope was kind of the main point of the whole story. So I've realized it's not really my cup of tea. I don't think that romances, I mean, I get it. I totally get why they are awesome and entertaining for some people, but I've realized that I always end up feeling a little bit like I wish there was more going on than just the romance, because the whole storyline is just all about their friendship. So I think I've realized romances aren't really for me, or books in which the main plot line is a romance aren't really for me. So wasn't obsessed with this one. I do think it's relatable though. I feel like we've all had that friend who we kind of like wonder like, you know, could we work out as a couple? Like, could this be more? So it kind of plays on that trope for sure. The writing is decent. I did give it a 4 out of 5. Next up was one of my favorites for May, and that is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Morata. This is a Japanese translated novel, and it is about a woman who works in a convenience store, hence the title. And I found it really fascinating. It's super short. I was intrigued mainly because of all the reviews and the kind of the buzz that it's been getting on social media. It sounds like there's not a lot going on, but there was a lot happening underneath the surface. So the blurb says, Convenience Store Woman is the charming and unforgettable story of Tokyo sales clerk Kiko Furukura. Kiko is an unusual person, someone who has never fit in, but when she takes a job at a Smile Mart, she finally finds peace and purpose in her daily tasks. But there is huge pressure on Kiko to pursue a career, to find a husband, and she feels forced to take desperate action in order to please the people around her instead of herself. Is there room in this normal world for someone as strange as Kiko? I felt like this was an ode to anybody who has ever felt kind of separate from society or like they didn't really fit in. So basically every single person on planet Earth can relate to this in some way, whether it be, you know, large or small. I really liked Kiko. You're very much inside her head. I can't remember, is it from first person? Yeah, it's from first person perspective. And she is sort of an oddball. She feels very, to me, it never says it. To me, I felt like she had to be neurodivergent in some sense. I don't know if it's like autism or something, but or maybe it just felt like that because she doesn't want anything normal. She doesn't want a husband. She doesn't want kids. All of her friends and family are like, you don't have a boyfriend yet? Like, when are you gonna start having kids? Like, you know, so because she doesn't want those things, it makes her seem very weird. It's so like odd to them and such a crazy concept that she just is perfectly fine and happy working at the convenience store. So themes of identity are really big in this one. The masks that we wear, the faces that we kind of put on in different situations to please different people. It basically felt like a character study to me, a really in-depth look at one woman who's sort of going against the grain, not intentionally, not like she's trying to stand out or be a rebel. She's just naturally that way. In my notes I said it raises questions like how much emphasis on what we do for work is too much. And I feel like definitely in America, that's like, you know, you meet someone new and that's one of the first questions that you ask them. It's like, oh, what do you do? And it's like there's more to a person that defines them than just what they do for work. A lot of people just work for money because, you know, money makes the world go round. You kind of have to have that. So that question I felt like kind of came up a little bit. Those questions aren't answered. They're not even really directly stated, it's just kind of me reading between the lines. I said, it made me wonder about the extent to which humans weigh our worth as a member of society on our jobs. I said perhaps Morata is commenting on the negative effects of that in an extreme example, one in which a woman genuinely lives for her job, because that's what it kind of feels like. It feels like it's kind of the only thing she has to live for. So this was really fascinating. in a very subtle way, and I feel like that's the mark of a good writer, is if you can make the reader think of all those things and question all of those things without ever stating any of those things directly. So yes, I really liked this one. Like I said, I think I gave it like a 4.5 out of 5. Next up is The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clayson. This is a personal finance book. I've been getting into that a little bit more recently, trying to set a budget for myself. Because your girl overspends sometimes, you know what I'm saying? So yes, books like this, I need more of them in my life. So I buddy read this one with my boyfriend. That was an issue that we had, was trying not to trip over our sentences with all the biblical syntax. But if you don't know, this is basically set in ancient Babylonia, and it's sort of practical financial advice, but disguised within these little parables. It says it covers the subjects of thrift, financial planning, and personal wealth. These fascinating and informative stories set you on a sure path to prosperity and its accompanying joys. It's super famous. If you go to any bookstore and you go to the finance section, like, they will have many copies of this book. I got a few things from it. I'm not gonna say it's like changed my perspective on finance and wealth, but there was one particular bit of advice. It was like a breakdown of where your income should go. So it said live off 70% of what you earn for your expenses. 20% should go to your debts if you have any, and then 10% to your savings. But yes, I feel like there's probably some more like modern, easier to understand books out there on personal finance. So if you guys have some recommendations, leave them for me in the comments below, because I'm very interested in that, trying to slowly work my way into that sort of realm. So I think I gave that one about like a 3 out of 5, just because of that old language, which makes sense because that's when it's supposed to be set. If you kind of feel like you don't know a lot about money or how to manage it, you weren't really taught anything in school, and so you're trying to learn yourself, I feel like it's a decent place to start. Next up, I listened to The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Loved this one. I think I gave it like a 4.5 out of 5. It is one of those experiencing all of your alternative life choices trope type books. But I thought it was done well, even though I feel like that's very overdone. We're getting a lot of books and movies lately that sort of, allow someone to either go back in time and fix something or experience all of their different like alternative lives. So this one follows a main character named Nora, and she's feeling pretty suicidal at the beginning of the book, so trigger warning for that. And then in that space between life and death, she ends up going to the Midnight Library. So all of the books on the shelf in this library, an infinite number of books, she can take off the shelf and experience an alternative life. If she had made a different choice, how would her life look, if she had made a slightly different decision? She can experience all of those different lives. I feel like constantly, especially with social media, we're always in our heads, at least I am, we're always in our heads with this like, well, what if I had stayed at that job? Or what if I moved to this state? Or what if I still was with that person? And it kind of makes you realize no life is perfect. She can pick a million different books off the shelf, and there's always going to be something in that life that's not how she would have imagined or not how she would have chosen. So it kind of helps you realize like the grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side. I won't say any more because I don't want to give anything away, no spoilers, but in my notes I said, although in the beginning I felt like it was going to be repetitive, in the beginning it did keep me intrigued, because we're sort of always wondering as the reader what the next life is going to be like. It definitely kept me entertained the whole time, and I want to read How to Stop Time next by Matt Haig, because I feel like that's another one of his really popular ones. Next up, I listened to Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. This was really very good. It's one of those books at the beginning, like right when I first finished it, I was like, okay, like don't really get it, like maybe something went over my head, didn't really feel like I was a very big fan of it. And then as the days go by and you kind of start thinking about it a little bit more, and scenes from it kind of keep popping back up into your head, you realize some things he was doing that were really very subtle but very interesting. So Clara and the Sun is set in a world in which children are given AFs, or artificial friends, basically robots that look like kids themselves, and a girl named Josie who is sick is given Clara. She chooses Clara as her AF, and she's so observant. I think that was one of the things I reflected on sort of at the end, realizing Clara is so aware, and she's so almost to the point where she overanalyzes things, because she's a robot. That's kind of like, you know, she's constantly taking in information and analyzing it and assessing it and figuring out, you know, how should I respond. So you end up caring for Clara more than you do for any of the humans in the book, which I found really fascinating. I think that's sort of something that Ishiguro he's doing intentionally, but it's so subtle you don't necessarily realize it's happening until you finish the book. This is also one of those books where there's not an exposition dump at the beginning to explain how this world works, which I actually really appreciated. I don't know if you guys, especially with science fiction, it's sort of a tricky genre for that, where an author creates a really fascinating world, but there's so many different things about it that they spend, you know, the first 25% of the book just explaining how this world works, and it can get really boring. He sort of leaves things a little bit open because you don't necessarily need to know as a reader, so why put them in there? You know, why waste time? And definitely starts making you think about robots and clones and consciousness and the human heart and what it means to be human. Like, you know, if we're feeling so attached to Clara, more so than we are the humans, what does that even say about robots? Like, is it possible for a robot to learn a human, to become one so well that they could pass for a human? So then what does it mean to be human? Ishiguro is really good at that, at sort of making you question all of those things. It's more engaging for you as a reader when that happens, because you actually have to think, and it's not just explained to you by the author, which is what I prefer. So yes, highly recommend that one. So the final book for May that I read was Feral Creatures by Keira Jane Buxton. This is a sequel to Hollow Kingdom, which is told from the perspective of this guy. His name is Shitturd, or ST for short, and he is a crow. He's a domesticated crow. In the first one, in Hollow Kingdom, it takes place when the zombie apocalypse happens, and so the whole storyline is him going out to like the neighborhood and trying to free all of the pets who were trapped because now their owners are all dead. So that was the plotline of the first one, which I thought was decent. I think I gave it like a 3.5, maybe a 4 out of 5. Wasn't obsessed with it, but the writing is really good, like the whole concept and being able to read from animals' perspectives. I feel like that's, you know, kind of rare in literature, and Buxton does a really good job of it. So again, we get the same narrator in Feral Creatures, but this time ST is trying to raise the last human, the last known surviving human, or is she the last? We don't really know. And he's doing a pretty good job. He's trying to teach her manners and that sort of thing. And of course they meet many unique animals along the way. There are actually chapters in here almost written like asides from like a different animal's perspective. I think there's like a dolphin at one point, a spotted ratfish, whatever that is. There's one told from a spider's perspective, from a lizard, and they don't necessarily propel the story itself forward. Like, they don't necessarily do anything for the plot, but it's just interesting reading from different animals' perspectives. She changes her writing style to kind of fit whatever animal or insect she's writing from. I will say it felt a little bit slow. Probably for like the whole second half, I was just kind of reading to get through it. I wasn't like super engaged with it. I do think her writing would shine so much brighter if she were to write short stories from like different animals' perspectives, and maybe they all kind of interlinked with each other. That would be really cool. If she ever wrote like a short story collection, I would be all over it. It felt a little bit flat for me. It felt a little bit slow. Even though there were things happening, it felt a little bit repetitive. I wasn't a huge fan of the pacing, but yeah, just the uniqueness of reading from animals' perspectives, just for that reason alone, I would recommend it. So that's everything, guys. That's all I read for May. Let me know what I should read next. What are you guys reading for June? What should I read on the beach? I'm going to Florida next week, so I'm gonna need recommendations. Let me know, and thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye. There's a fly in here, and he's gonna drive me nuts. Yeah, there's a fly, and you need to get him. You need to eat him. Get you some protein.